Hey, this is Rich over at TVP Live with another quick tips tutorials brought to you by Photoshop Elements Custom Tutorials Group. And let's jump right in with today's poster. Wants to know how to put a pumpkin right here and a child inside the pumpkin. Now I took creative license to get rid of the original pumpkin so we can start from scratch. And here on the next tab we have an original pumpkin. And on the very next tab we have the child. And this was the child submitted by the poster. And so what you got to do first is take out the white so that the child is like a PNG. So I went ahead and cut that out and cut out this little section. And along with doing that, I gave the magic of Hollywood and added a new face that I found on the internet. And here we go. So this is now our new picture that we're going to put in the other tab project. And finally, we have a piece of pumpkin that was been cut in half, and this way that we can use that back of the pumpkin. So let's go ahead and start with number one. We got this portion here. Let's go ahead and grab our pumpkin from here, and we're going to drag this with the left mouse button up to that tab, bring it back down and let go of the mouse button, and there's our imported pumpkin. Now what we want to do is size this so that it looks realistically and place it. And the original picture from the poster had a pumpkin that was kind of encroaching on both sides, so we can do something similar like this. And if we want it to be a child inside, let's make the pumpkin a little bit bigger even. Make it huge. Let's say like this. That looks pretty good right around there. Next, we want to do some adjustments so it looks like it's really sitting in here on top of the straw. So let's go ahead and go first to Enhance, Color, and Hue Saturation. And as you can see, there's too much color here. It looks a lot more colorful than these other ones. So what I'm going to do is take the saturation, and I can go all the way high, I can go all the way down to black and white, and somewhere in the middle, and just kind of ride it back and forth until it starts to look just like the other pumpkins. I'd say right around there. So I'm going to hit OK, and then we can come back up here and go to Enhance. This time we go to Lighting, Bright, and Contrast. And then we can play with the contrast. And you can see at 0 here, it's a little too much contrast. It looks much more contrasty than the other pumpkins. So I'm going to lessen the contrast a little bit like that. And it starts to look like the other ones. Then we can make it a little bit brighter like this. Now it's starting to look much more like the other pumpkins. And once we got it where we want it, we'll hit OK, and that looks pretty good. Now about the straw down here, there's a couple things we can do. So I'd like to maybe erase a little bit of the pumpkin and then also do some clone stamping to make it look like the straw is there. So I'll take an eraser and let's get a big like 150 point here, and I'm going to erase portions of the bottom here like this. And this kind of helps it look like it's been meshing in with its background and the foreground. And then we can come over here and add a new layer, and then come over here and grab the clone stamp tool. And what we want to do is make sure down here that sample all layers is clicked. That way it'll see right through all the layers and pick exactly what you can see through the circle. So if I hold the Alt down and grab some of the straw right around here and hit click and come down here and just do a little swath like that. And you see that? It looks like when I toggle it on and off, like the straw is in front of the pumpkin and the pumpkin is actually sitting inside the straw. And it's as easy as that. So now let's consider shadows. Now, if you look at these pumpkins here, what do they all have in common? Towards the bottom is this one has a shadow that's covering this one slightly, right down in this area. They all have this shadow down here. This one has shadow down here, but these don't have shadows from the big new pumpkin. So let's go ahead and create that shadow. It's going to be behind this one, so that's underneath, but a front of the background. So we want to create a new layer by going to the background and hit new layer. Now this shadow is going to be dark, so if I take the eyedropper tool and grab the shadow from somewhere else and come up here to the color and look where it's at, I like that, but I'm going to exaggerate it and bring it down a little bit more like that and hit OK. Grab a brush, make sure it's a soft brush here. You can choose the brushes from hard and all the way to soft. What size do we want? We want it to be pretty big, so let's try something like 300 point. So if this pumpkin was sitting here, it would create a shadow like this. like that. Same thing on this side, like that. See that? And now we can go over here to the opacity and lessen it to almost nothing, and then bring it back a little bit, like maybe 20 point. I'm going to toggle this on and off. See that? Now it looks more realistic. So now let's go ahead and introduce our top portion of the pumpkin so we can cut this pumpkin out. So let's go ahead and grab our vertical portion here, and I'm going to left mouse click, drag that into our current project, bring it back down, let go of the mouse button, and there's our pumpkin top. So what we want to do now, make sure that this is the same size as the top of the original pumpkin. So I want to make it see-through, so I'll take the opacity and make that like 50 point. So now we can see through it exactly where it's supposed to be. And then we want to resize it so it fits the original pumpkin. So I'm going to grab this a little bit bigger, grab this a little bit bigger. But what's happening is this is wrapping around like this. I want it to wrap around with the original pumpkin. So I'm going to go to Image, Transform, and Distort. And this way I can grab each corner and distort it so that it fits the original pumpkin as much as we can. And this is looking pretty good right around there. So I'm going to hit OK and then bring that opacity back up to 100 points and see what it looks like. So now let's make a copy so we can separate this top portion of the pumpkin into two pieces, the center and the edge. So I'm going to go ahead and come up here and right click and make duplicate. I'll go ahead and turn off the top layer and work on the next layer. And I can go ahead and erase the center portion with a 25 here, and we can just come up like this. And I'm just going to go straight down because we want that actually to wrap out here. And let's go ahead and take the polygon tool and cut that out and hit delete. Next we can get rid of the far edges of the pumpkin here that we don't need, and we're going to bring the opacity back down to 50 so we can see exactly where we want to get rid of it. And take a large eraser, like let's say 100 point or so, and I'm going to fade this out along here like that. Just erase that. And finally cut out what we don't need on the outside of that new portion. So I'm going to actually use the lasso tool because this doesn't have to be so perfect, and just cut around there like this. And come on over here and hit delete. And do the same thing for the right side and hit delete. Next, I'll bring the opacity back up to 100%, and that's looking pretty good. Now the color is a little bit off, so I'm going to go ahead and go to Enhance, Lighting, Brightness. I can bring the contrast down a little bit, and maybe the brightness down a little bit like that, so it's not so overly saturated. And I think there's too much color too, so we'll go to Enhance, Color, Hue Saturation, and let's bring that down to like this. See, that's looking a little more realistic, like the edge of the pumpkin. So now what we want to do is cut out the hole that the child is supposedly sitting in. So on this original layer, let's go ahead and create a cut of the pumpkin that comes across like that. And if it was cut down into a chair, it might come down like this and then come across. This is using the lasso tool. And come across to here, come back up, and then come back out. And we just go ahead and circle the whole edge of the pumpkin like that. I'm going to right click and hit cut. That created a new layer so that we can use this later on for the top. So what do we do with this hole? Let's turn on that copy that we made of the round portion from before. And let's go ahead and put that behind our other round portion. I'm going to bring that right around here, drag this down so it fits. As a matter of fact, I think I want to bring it even back behind the pumpkin, right around there. See that? And now we can go ahead and cut away the portion that we don't need on that layer. And we just simply trace it and hit delete. Boom. So it's starting to look like a pumpkin that's been cut out and left open. Now all we're missing is a portion right here, so it looks like it was cut out. And I'm not sure exactly how to create that, so let's go ahead and just figure out how to do that. So we go right here to this layer, add a new blank layer, and with the lasso tool, we're going to create thickness of the pumpkin. So I'm going to start here, come across to here, and come down like that. Come back up here, come across to here, and circle back so we can fill this in. What color do we want? Let's go ahead and take the eyedropper tool. Let's just pick a color like this, maybe a little bit darker like that. Grab the paint bucket and paint that right in. That's looking a little better. And I think what we can do is take the smudge tool and smudge it up into the original pumpkin a little bit. Maybe even take that portion, go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and blur it all like this so that the edges become a little bit blurry. Let's do a 3.5 blur. That's looking good. And finally, we just need some dark edges on these lines so that it looks like it's part of the pumpkin, like you see that portion there. So we'll take another layer and grab the eyedropper tool, and let's grab something dark like that. I'll zoom in, make this really small, like a 15 point. And we want to kind of follow these lines. And once we got this exactly where we want them to be, all we do is come up to opacity and bring it down to almost 0, and then just bring it up a tiny bit, like 15 point. You see, it's really, really subtle. It adds inner dimension to the pumpkin. And now it's looking like a pumpkin that's been cut open. So what happens now? If we go ahead and grab our child and pull that over to this tab, bring it in, and drop him here. Well, first thing, he's in the wrong layer, so let's bring him up little by little. I think we want him to be on the front layer, at least on the front portion here, and even higher there because there's the feet are fading out, so that looks better right around there. So let's go ahead and turn off the child for a second. So if we want the child to be in the pumpkin, so this portion here is in the front, let's go ahead and separate the pumpkin into 2 portions instead of all these different layers. So I'm going to leave the grass alone and grab this layer 1, layer 7, and layer 6. Let's go ahead and highlight those 3, right click and hit merge layers. So now we got the front portion of the pumpkin in 1 layer. And go ahead and turn that off. And now we want to grab the back layers, which is going to be layer 4, layer 4 copy. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and bring that down to here and see if that is the rest of the pumpkin. It looks like it is. So grab those 2 layers and merge those 2 layers together. The reason why we just did that was that we can take the child now, and I'm going to go ahead and lock the child. Now we can take both portions of the pumpkin and resize it to fit the child. See that? We can do whatever we want. Once we got the pumpkin where we want, we resize the child and it's looking pretty good. Now all we need is a little bit of shadows. So let's put the shadows in front of the pumpkin. So I'm going to create a layer right there, another blank layer. And since we already had a dark background, we're going to use that same color as our shadow. We need a big shadow, let's say at 300 point, and just start creating your shadows. Now you can make several different layers in case you want different levels of shadows. And just make sure that they're realistic looking. See, I like that for the bottom half. And I can toggle the shadow on and off. See how realistic that is? And I'm going to create another layer because I want it to be a little darker down here for the feet. And then take our opacity and bring it up or down. I like that right around there, about 70%. And then next, let's put some shadows inside the pumpkin. And we'll go ahead and add another blank layer there. Grab the brush and where the child would be, creating a shadow inside the pumpkin. And now all our shadows are looking pretty realistic. Let's look at them without and bring them in one by one. There's the arms, there's the back, there's the feet, and there's the overall bottom side. And we're good to go. And if you really want to add the tip of the pumpkin there, we can go ahead and do that. And first we're just going to take the eraser, make that like a 15 point or so, and just go ahead and erase away. And once we got that cut out, we can grab the lasso tool, the polygon, and just cut out what you want to keep. Double click and right click and hit cut. And that basically separated that from this bottom portion. We go ahead and delete that bottom portion. Let's see, what size do we want? It looks a little big, so we'll go ahead and make it a little bit smaller, like that. And obviously it's on the wrong layer, so all we got to do is bring it behind the child. Boom. And once we had it placed here, we'll do what we did before with the eraser. Erase some of the bottom. Let's grab us a big 75-point eraser and make that bottom portion sort of soft like this. And then we can grab some grass from over here using the clone stamp tool. 150 point. Hold down the Alt right here and come up here. Let's go ahead and add a new layer and just kind of come across here like that. And there we go. The grass is covering the bottom portion of that pumpkin. And that's all there is to it. I know this one was a long one, but it was a lot of work to do it. Lots of layers. And now we can take our cropping tool and crop this photo back down to what we like. Right around there. And call it a day. This is Rich calling it quits for this tutorial, saying over and out.